You've seen it 1,000 times. A dusty street, the blazing sun, a lone gunslinger's hand hovering over his Colt. A quick draw, a single shot before noon. The truth? That showdown almost never happened. The Wild West you think you know, from lightning-fast duels to flawless six-shooters, is mostly Hollywood fantasy. And here's the kicker. Chances are, you still believe at least half of it. If you're already hooked and want more truths the movies never told you, hit that like button and subscribe so I know you're with me. Today, we're pulling the trigger on 11 Wild West weapon myths that refuse to die. From guns that jammed more often than they fired, to duels that existed only in dime novels, we're dismantling the frontier's biggest lies, one round at a time. Saddle up, this is the history you were never taught. Myth 1, the high noon quick draw duel. Let's start with the image everyone knows. A dusty street, a sheriff and an outlaw lock eyes from 20 paces. The crowd scatters, the clock tower tolls 12, and in a heartbeat, leather slaps, hammers drop, and one man lies dead. The quick draw duel, the ultimate test of nerve, speed, and honor. But here's the truth. That scene wasn't taken from history. It was invented in dime novels of the late 1800s and later polished by Hollywood into legend. Directors loved it because it was clean, simple, and perfect for the camera. What in reality was a chaotic burst of violence became a ritualized contest of honor. Gary Cooper in High Noon and Clint Eastwood in his spaghetti westerns burned the image into our minds until fiction felt like fact. So how often do these high noon showdowns actually happen? Almost never. The idea of two men formally squaring off and drawing on a signal was vanishingly rare. Real gunfights in the Old West were ugly, unpredictable, and anything but honorable. More often than not, they broke out in saloons after too much whiskey, in sudden ambushes, or in frantic exchanges of bullets at arm's length. Think about the most famous gun battle of all, the gunfight at the OK Corral. Despite its legendary name, it wasn't a duel at all. It was a 30-second explosion of gunfire in a cramped lot, with 9 men blasting away just feet apart. No pacing, no draw, only chaos. And if you look at the records, most men killed in gunfights weren't shot face-to-face at all. They were hit from behind, taken by surprise, or cut down before they could even react. On the frontier, speed meant nothing if someone already had you in their sights. So why does the duel endure? Because the truth is messy. Ambushes and drunken killings don't sell tickets. A structured showdown, though, that gave people a sense of order in a lawless land. It turned murder into a sport, violence into a story with clear winners and losers. The myth of the duel made the West feel honorable, when in reality, it was anything but. And once we peel back that fantasy, the real West comes into focus. A world where life was cheap and death came suddenly. But if the duel itself was Hollywood invention, what about the lightning-fast gun tricks inside those duels? Could a cowboy really turn his revolver into a machine gun? That's our next myth. Myth number 2, fanning the hammer for ultimate firepower. So, the gentleman's duel is a myth, but the techniques? Surely those were real. You've seen it 100 times. The hero surrounded, jaw clenched, revolver low at his hip. He slaps the hammer with his palm again and again, unleashing a blur of smoke and bullets. This is fanning, the supposed trick that let one man fire like 10. On screen, it's pure adrenaline. A revolver blazing as fast as the hand can move, smoke pouring out, enemies dropping left and right. It looks unstoppable, like a cowboy's secret superpower. No wonder Hollywood made it a staple of the Western hero. But in the real West, fanning was a disaster. First, it was wildly inaccurate. You weren't aiming down sights, just spraying lead and praying to hit something. Beyond a few feet, you'd be lucky to hit the side of a barn. Think you'd clear a saloon this way? More likely you'd waste every shot. And worse, it wrecked the gun itself. The delicate parts inside a 19th century revolver weren't built for that abuse. Fanning knocked the cylinder off track until one misaligned bullet could slam into the frame and blow the weapon apart, sometimes in the shooter's own hand. Yes, fanning existed, but only on stage. Trick shooters in Wild West shows like Buffalo Bills use modified guns and blanks to dazzle crowds with smoke and speed. No serious gunfighter would risk his life on a move that destroyed accuracy, and could destroy his revolver too. So why does the myth stick? Because it feels like a power fantasy. It's the gunfighter's version of a superhero move. All flash, no substance. But the truth on the frontier was the opposite. Accuracy and reliability mattered far more than raw speed. A well-aimed shot meant survival. Fanning meant failure. Which leaves the real question. If firing one revolver faster was useless, how did a gunfighter actually double his firepower in a fight? The answer wasn't abusing one gun. It was carrying 2. Myth number 3, gunslingers always carried 2 guns. So fanning is a bust, but what about the need for more firepower?
Enter the classic image, the gunslinger, with a revolver on each hip, the iconic 2-gun rig. It screams danger, suggesting a man so skilled, so unstoppable, that one revolver just isn't enough. Dime novelists loved this idea. They painted legends like Wild Bill Hickok as human arsenals, strapped with pistols wherever they could fit them. And yes, Hickok sometimes carried 2, but the stories stretched the truth for drama. Hollywood grabbed the image and ran, because let's face it, 2 revolvers on screen simply look deadlier than one. It became the shortcut for showing the ultimate gunslinger. But reality? Far less glamorous. A A loaded Colt Peacemaker weighed almost 3 pounds. Strap one to each hip, add belts and ammo, and you're hauling 6 pounds of cold steel before you've even saddled a horse. That didn't make you faster, it made you slower. And here's the kicker, most men couldn't shoot accurately with their offhand anyway. Think you'd blaze away with both guns at once? In truth, you just waste bullets and probably miss everything. The smarter solution was what gunmen later called the New York Reload, carrying a second, smaller, hidden pistol. When the main revolver ran dry, no one fumbled with loose cartridges under fire. You just ditched it and drew the backup. That was faster, lighter, and far more practical than trying to play Hollywood hero with twin Colts. Sure, a handful of men carried 2 pistols, but usually for intimidation or reputation. For the everyday cowboy, lawman, or outlaw, one good revolver was plenty. So why does the myth endure? Because it's the ultimate power fantasy. Dual guns look like absolute dominance, total readiness. But the truth of the frontier was simpler. Practicality ruled. Every ounce of gear had to earn its place, and a single trusted sidearm beat the weight and clumsiness of 2. Still, when you imagine that lone gunfighter, or even the mythical 2-gun hero, there's always one revolver you picture in the holster, a weapon so legendary it was dubbed the gun that won the West. But did it really? By the way, which myth has shocked you most so far? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. And if these myths are surprising you already, hit that like button. It shows us you want more of these hidden truths. And if you're new here, subscribe now, because we're about to tackle one of the biggest legends of them all.
Myth number 4, the Colt 45. Was it really the gun that won the West? The phrase is almost as legendary as the frontier itself. And the weapon everyone pictures behind it, the Colt single-action army, better known as the Peacemaker, chambered in .45 Colt. In Hollywood, every sheriff, outlaw, and lone rider carried one. Colt's marketing made sure of it. And when the US Army adopted the revolver in 1873, the reputation seemed bulletproof. With its heavy .45 cartridge and reliable design, the Peacemaker became the star of dime novels and Western films alike. But here's the twist. The famous slogan, "The gun that won the West," wasn't born on the frontier at all. It was cooked up decades later by Colt's distributors, a sales pitch dressed up as history. The reality? The Colt was an excellent revolver, but crowning it the gun of the West is pure myth. For starters, it didn't even exist until the mid-1870s. By then, the West was already full of older firearms. After the Civil War, the country was flooded with cheap surplus pistols, like the Colt 1851 Navy, that anyone could afford. Most frontiersmen were far more likely to carry those than the shiny new Peacemaker, and Colt had stiff competition. Smith & Wesson's Model 3 top-break revolver could reload in seconds. Snap the frame open, and all 6 empty shells popped out at once. Compare that to the Colt, which had to be reloaded 1 cartridge at a time. No wonder names like Wyatt Earp and Jesse James often carried Smith & Wessons as readily as Colts. But the real king of frontier firepower? The shotgun. A simple, double-barreled shotgun was devastating up close. And for stagecoach guards, homesteaders, and townsfolk alike, it was far more practical than any revolver. So why does the Colt still dominate the legend? Because one iconic gun is easier to sell than the messy truth. The marketing myth buried countless other weapons, from Smith & Wessons to surplus pistols to the humble shotgun in the footnotes of history. The truth is, the West wasn't won by brand loyalty. It was won by whatever a man could afford and trust to fire when he needed it. The Colt may have been king of the 6-shooters, but it was rarely alone. More often than not, it rode beside an equally legendary rifle. And that rifle's story might just be another myth. Myth number 5. The Winchester 73 was the only rifle that mattered. You've heard it called the rifle that tamed the frontier, the Winchester Model 1873. It even had a Hollywood movie named after it. On screen, every cowboy slung one across his saddle, the perfect partner to his Colt Peacemaker. The Winchester 73 became the symbol of the Wild West, the one rifle that supposedly defined an era. And make no mistake, it was a groundbreaking gun. A lever-action repeater that could fire multiple shots without reloading was a game changer, and its reputation for reliability was legendary. Better yet, chambering it in pistol rounds like .44-40 meant you could carry the same ammo for both rifle and revolver. Hollywood loved that idea and turned the Winchester into the star of countless westerns. But here's the truth. The Winchester was the Cadillac of rifles, and it carried a Cadillac price tag. Most frontiersmen simply couldn't afford one. Instead, they turned to cheaper, more available options. The Springfield trapdoor rifle, a single-shot Army surplus weapon, flooded the frontier. For long-range power, the Sharps rifle, nicknamed the Big 50, could drop a buffalo at half a mile. Earlier repeaters like the Spencer and Henry were still in circulation, and for sheer practicality, the humble double-barreled shotgun was far more common in homes and farmsteads than any Winchester. Think every cowboy had a Winchester slung over his shoulder? In reality, most used whatever they could buy, borrow, or inherit. The Winchester 73 was rare enough that owning one was a mark of wealth as much as firepower. So why does the myth endure? Because one legendary name is easier to sell than a dozen different guns. The Winchester was sleek, reliable, and brilliantly marketed.
Its story overshadowed the diverse reality of frontier weapons, just like the Colt did with handguns. The truth is, rifles in the West reflected a man's profession and his pocketbook. A buffalo hunter's Sharps, a farmer's shotgun, a soldier's surplus Springfield. Every gun told a story, but the Winchester's 15-round tubular magazine gave it something else, an almost magical sense of endless firepower. And that may be where the myth of infinite ammunition was born. If you're enjoying having Hollywood exposed round by round, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next truth bomb. Myth number 6, cowboys had infinite ammunition.
In the movies, a cowboy's six-shooter might as well be a machine gun. Heroes blaze away with 20 rounds from a 6-shot revolver, and their rifles seem to fire forever without a reload. The thought of running out of ammo? It never even comes up. That's not history, that's Hollywood. Directors ignored reloading because it killed the pace. Stopping mid-shootout so the hero could spend half a minute poking cartridges into a revolver isn't thrilling, it's boring. So, filmmakers skipped it. And over time, we all subconsciously bought into the myth that ammunition was limitless. But the reality was brutal. Ammunition was expensive, scarce, and every shot mattered. Revolvers held 6 rounds, but most cowboys only loaded 5, keeping the hammer on an empty chamber for safety. That gave you just 5 chances. Think you'd win a gunfight spraying bullets? More likely, you'd run dry in seconds. And reloading, it was slow, clumsy, and dangerous. With a Colt Peacemaker, you had to half-cock the hammer, open the loading gate, eject each casing one at a time, then reload each round the same way. Under fire, that 30 seconds could cost you your life. That's why cowboys didn't waste ammunition. Every pull of the trigger was deliberate. The Hollywood myth of infinite ammo gave us bigger, flashier battles, but it erased the constant pressure that defined real gunfights. In truth, every firefight was a high-stakes chess match. The ticking clock wasn't just your opponent, it was your dwindling supply of bullets. With only 5 or 6 shots before disaster, every round had to be perfectly placed. Which leads straight to the next towering myth, the belief that every frontiersman was a master marksman. Myth number 7, gunslingers had superhuman accuracy. If ammo was scarce, then surely every bullet had to be deadly accurate, and in the movies, it was. The cowboy could flip a coin in the air and hit it from 50 paces. He could slice a playing card edge on, or nail impossibly small targets with ease. On screen, the gunslinger's aim was almost superhuman. The origin of this myth is real, but specialized. Wild West show stars like Annie Oakley and Doc Carver were phenomenal trick shooters who wowed crowds with feats that looked impossible. Dime novelists and filmmakers took their skills and gave them to every cowboy, outlaw, and sheriff. Suddenly, superhuman accuracy wasn't the exception, it was the rule. It elevated the hero into myth, making each scarce shot seem unstoppable. The truth? 19th century firearms were crude, unreliable tools. Revolver sights were little more than a front blade and a rear notch scratched into the frame. Powder charges were inconsistent, throwing off bullet trajectory. Black powder fouled barrels quickly, making each shot less accurate than the last. Think you could nail a coin at 50 yards with a Colt Peacemaker? In reality, most shooters were lucky to hit a man across the street. At 25 yards, accuracy already required skill. Beyond 50, it was largely chance. That's why real gunfights almost always happened at point-blank range, often within 15 feet. At that distance, precision didn't matter as much as speed and nerve. Hollywood exaggerated accuracy to show superiority, but it makes us forget that frontier firearms weren't precision rifles. They were clunky, smoky, and wildly inconsistent. The legacy of this myth is an inflated view of frontier gunfighters. We picture them as sharpshooters with laser-guided aim, when in reality, they were often scrambling in close quarters, missing as often as they hit. And when a bullet did miss, Hollywood had another trick up its sleeve, the ringing, impossible sound of a ricochet. We're deep into the myths now, but here's where you come in. What Wild West misconception have you always wondered about? Drop it in the comments, we read them all. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe and join this community of history detectives. Myth number 8, the deadly bullet ricochet. The gunfight erupts, bullets slam into stone, and we hear it, zing, pow, that classic Hollywood ricochet, as rounds supposedly ping off rocks and spin away like deadly pinballs. Here's the truth, that sound is pure Hollywood. Sound designers invented it to make gunfights feel chaotic and dangerous. We've heard it so many times that it feels real, but it isn't. Think hiding behind a rock would turn you into a target for bouncing bullets? Not in the Old West. Most rounds were soft, heavy lead. When they hit hard surfaces, they didn't ricochet cleanly. They flattened, shattered, or buried themselves. If a fragment did fly off, it was slow, tumbling, and only dangerous at very close range. Not the razor-sharp steel marble movies made us believe in. And the sound? Forget the high-pitched zing. The real thing was dull, ugly, and anticlimactic. A thump, a crack, maybe a spray of fragments. Not exactly the stuff of thrilling cinema. The Ricochet myth survives because it's perfect shorthand. It turns missed shots into drama and makes every firefight sound bigger. But the reality is harsher. Soft lead bullets weren't bouncing around. They were made to deform, dump energy, and rip through flesh with devastating force. And if that sounds brutal, imagine a weapon that didn't rely on a single bullet at all. A gun that unleashed a storm of lead in every blast. That brings us to the shotgun, and its most notorious myth.
Myth number 9. Sawed-off shotguns were purely outlaw weapons. In movies, the sawed-off shotgun is the outlaw's trademark. Bank robbers, bandits, backshooting villains, all hiding short, menacing barrels under their dusters. It looks brutal, sprays lead everywhere, and screams criminal intent. Add in its Prohibition-era reputation, and the sawed-off feels like it was built purely for mayhem. But here's the truth. In the Old West, the sawed-off wasn't the bandit's weapon. It was the guard. Its most common carrier wasn't an outlaw, but the shotgun messenger, riding next to the stagecoach driver, protecting gold and mail. Think about it. A full-length 30-inch shotgun barrel was almost impossible to swing inside a cramped, bouncing coach. Cut it shorter, and suddenly you had a weapon you could actually maneuver in close quarters. And it wasn't illegal. Far from it. Express companies and even police departments issued sawed-offs as official equipment. The first federal laws restricting barrel length didn't appear until the National Firearms Act of 1934, decades after the frontier was gone. So why does the myth of the outlaw sawed-off persist? Because it looks dangerous. The very words sawed-off sound illicit, and Hollywood leaned into that image. Over time, a practical defensive weapon was recast as a symbol of villainy. In reality, the sawed-off tells a story of frontier pragmatism, adapting tools to survive specific dangers. A shotgun cut down for speed and mobility wasn't about crime. It was about protecting lives and cargo on dangerous trails. But while a sawed-off could be hidden under a coat, it wasn't the king of concealment. That honor went to a pocket-sized pistol so small and myth-laden, it practically vanished into a gambler's sleeve. Myth number 10. Derringers were exclusively ladies' guns. In Hollywood, the Derringer is always a woman's weapon. A tiny pistol tucked into a garter, slipped into a handbag, or hidden in the sleeve of a saloon girl. On screen, it's the delicate firearm of choice for damsels in distress, the opposite of the heavy six-shooters carried by men. But here's the truth. The Derringer wasn't just a ladies' gun. In fact, it was immensely popular with men. Gamblers, bankers, lawmen, even merchants carried them. Anyone who needed protection without flaunting a big revolver on their hip. Think the Derringer was only for women? Try telling that to the gambler across the table with one tucked under his vest, ready to end an argument with a single pull of the trigger. The appeal was obvious. In a saloon, brandishing a full-sized revolver was a provocation, but a Derringer, small, discreet, and deadly at close range, was an ace up the sleeve. The Remington Model 95 Double Derringer, the most famous design, packed a serious punch with its 41 rimfire cartridge. For such a small pistol, it was more than capable of killing at close quarters. Nobody wanted to be on the wrong end of one. The ladies' gun trope is just another Hollywood shortcut shaped by gender stereotypes. It stripped away the Derringer's real role, a serious tool for self-defense, chosen by men and women alike who valued stealth over spectacle. And that's the key. The Derringer was about discretion. It reveals a West less focused on flashy duels and more about survival through subtlety and surprise. But what if you could take that stealth one step further? What if you could fire a gun without anyone even hearing it? That leads us to the strangest, most anachronistic myth of them all. Myth number 11. Silencers were used in the Old West. A shadowy figure moves through the night. He attaches a sleek tube to the end of his revolver. There's a soft instead of a loud bang. This is the work of an assassin, using a silencer to commit a murder without raising the alarm. Surely this ultimate tool of stealth existed for the spies and killers of the frontier. This myth is born from anachronism. We see spies and assassins use suppressors in modern thrillers and assume that such a useful tool must have existed in some form in the past. The idea of a quiet gun fits perfectly with the clandestine, shadowy side of the Old West narrative. Secret plots, ambushes, and silent killings. This one is simple. The firearm suppressor wasn't invented until the early 20th century. Hiram Percy Maxim, son of the machine gun inventor, patented the first commercially successful Maxim silencer in 1909. This was decades after the Wild West era had effectively ended.
Even if a suppressor had existed, it wouldn't work on the vast majority of Old West handguns. Revolvers are inherently loud because of the cylinder gap, the small space between the cylinder and the barrel. When a revolver is fired, hot, high-pressure gas escapes from this gap with a loud crack. A suppressor only traps gas exiting the muzzle. It does nothing to stop the noise from the cylinder gap, making it largely ineffective on a typical revolver. The myth of the silent revolver persists because it's a cool and compelling gadget that fits the espionage narrative we project onto the past. It's a case of modern technology being fictionally retrofitted into a historical setting where it simply did not belong. The absence of suppressors reinforces a simple truth about the West. Violence was loud. A gunshot was an unmistakable alarm that would alert everyone for blocks around. It was a public event, impossible to hide, adding another layer of consequence and risk to every pull of the trigger. Thanks for joining us on this journey to separate fact from fiction. If you enjoyed busting these myths, give this video a thumbs up and share it with a fellow history enthusiast. And most importantly, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on because the past is full of secrets and you won't want to miss our next adventure.